So I have failed to look at our agenda for today, so let's go.
We need to start with the motion.
All right. Who wants to make that motion?
I don't have it in front of me. Is that electronic motion?
You don't have it memorized by now?
Just a minute.
Yeah, it's that electronic motion.
All right, ready?
Ready.
I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this council executive committee. Meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreak. Any rule conflicting with the governor's Order 16, Executive Order 16 and 34, permitting electronic meetings be suspended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. So moved, and we will begin our meeting then. All right. Can someone tell me what's the first thing on the agenda?
Homelessness Planning Council agenda.
Okie doke.
So Abigail, I'm gonna give it to you.
All right, so I sent this out earlier today. It is very much a draft. I didn't even put timeframes on there because there's a lot of things, and I think depending on how you guys want to prioritize and group, it'll adjust timeframes. But one would be an update, like usual, from MHID and MDHA. Now that could include updates such as HUD technical assistance summary regarding the technical assistance we're receiving for ESG and COVID-19 funding, the CARES Act, that's specific to homelessness. That could also include an update on what's going on with the planning council members and the vote that will be happening tomorrow with the general membership to extend the terms of 5 of the planning council members that are put in place by the membership body. So that's Beth Shin, Ingrid McIntyre, Dawn Diener, April Calvin, and Trina. So we can kind of include those updates in there if you want to. The other thing is, I sent this in an email, but a recognition of the outgoing members that we know we're rolling off, which would be Bob Freeman, Tim Leith, and Teresa Skiles. And then strategic plan updates and progress. And then just COVID-19 updates, and this could include the task force continuation, depending on the conversation you guys have today, because that's on the agenda for today. And then I also wanted to talk about virtual meetings and potential charter amendment that could at least allow the committees to meet virtually. We now know that the governor has extended the state of emergency, which will allow us to continue doing the virtual meetings through August, but even still, I think this is a good conversation to have with the general membership and to look at as we amend our charter now, so that we have the grace and ability to keep doing this should that state of emergency not continue at the end of August, and we still need a way to be able to have virtual meetings. So that's what I've got on there in a nutshell. Any questions about arrangement?
So talk to me just a little bit about the charter amendment option. I saw your email and read that, and Derek has said that if we amend the charter, we can allow our committees to meet virtually.
So the way that we've set the planning council, if there's no state of emergency or executive order from the governor's office, the planning council themselves will always have to meet in person. Because it has to be a public meeting. Now, the committees themselves are not required to be public by the law, unless there's more than one planning council member on the committee. So, but right now, our charter requires all committees to be public. So we have to hold, if we don't have an executive order that allows us to have public virtual meetings, based on our charter, we have to hold all of our committees in person. So if we wanted to be able to have them virtually, then we would need to adjust the language to not be a public meeting, but I think we could do it in such a way that would still provide the requirements of notification and things that we do now.
So we could amend the charter to say that committee meetings may be held virtually, and will have public listening access, maybe something like that. Because I don't want to close the committee meetings completely to the general public if they want to attend, but I also don't want to make it a requirement. So we need to figure out what language would work there, and maybe we can get Derek to give us the right language.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And
All right.
so I just thought since we're getting having a virtual general membership meeting tomorrow anyway, that I would throw that out there to go ahead and get some of their questions and concerns, so that as you guys are making charter amendments and putting that together and developing the language, that we have all this already on the front end.
Okay.
But the motion itself, the first motion is the electronic meeting motion. But then the main motion on the table at the meeting tomorrow is not this virtual versus non versus public and, not public, but is instead extending the terms of the folks that the COC general membership voted in until such time as the ballots can be cast at an in-person meeting, right? So there are two issues. That there's the extending the terms of the planning council members who the COC general membership voted in, and that's the motion that's on the agenda. And then there's the other thing that Abby is talking about in terms of can this charter language be shifted and kind of remove some of the public language that would allow for virtual meetings of the continuum of care and committee meetings to occur that way as well. I guess what I'm wondering about is that now that the virtual meetings can continue, there's the charter revision
Did you hear that?
committee.
The governor has extended the order. So, Susie, let me ask a quick, or Abigail. So I'm looking at the agenda for the planning council meeting 8, and there's only one action on it, and that's approval of minutes. We have another action item that's about extending the terms, correct?
No, that has to be voted on by the general membership body. That's their action item tomorrow. That's just to update you guys on what's going on.
Gotcha. All right.
Because those
All
are
right,
the
I was
minutes.
confused.
That's all.
Gotcha.
Not tomorrow's.
All right.
Tomorrow's.
And then
Okay.
Susie, did you want to go, I'm not sure if you wanted to go that route. So we also need to update the charter anyway. And now that it's extended, the deadline for us to have a final COC vote on the charter with all the amendments that we need to, we just need a new charter and send it to HUD to meet our grant requirements by August anyway. So it should be implemented there, whatever we need to do. That's we have a timeline that we're going to go through this week. Just, for the charter committee to meet and go through that timeline rather tight and get that actually done by August.
Okay. And Susie, do we ever make a meeting to figure out when we're going to meet for the charter committee?
We're talking at 11 tomorrow, Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
Mhm.
Does that work?
Just talking about the meeting dates and times and all that kind of stuff. And I think you said you were free and Judy's free
What time?
at 11.
Yeah. You should have already received a invitation.
So then the charter committee has not just more than one, it has more than one planning commission council meeting, a member on it. It has 4, I think, or 5. So that group, even though the
Right.
governor has extended the order, that group must meet in person.
No.
Yes?
So because the governor extended the order, they don't have to.
But even though there's more than one planning council member on it? Okay. That's all out the window. Thank you.
It gets
The
complex.
extension of the order changes everything we've been working on for the past week, Susie.
Oh, Abigail, does that mean that it needs to be a public meeting where you have to send the notice out in advance?
Yes.
Okay.
But the meeting that's happening on Wednesday is just between, I think, Paula as the chair of the charter committee and staff, so that they can work out the schedule and put in place the process for getting those meetings set up.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm up to speed. I apologize.
Me too.
There's been a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Honestly, I have to say there's just been a lot. All right. Great. Thank you. All right. Anyone have anything else about the planning council agenda for next week?
Do you have a preference for the flow or how it's set up? I mean, I really just kind of put things on there.
It looks fine to me. I'm welcome moment of silence, approval, updates. Yeah, I mean, it looks fine to me.
Okay, and we'll have to do an approval virtual meeting on there now, so I'll add that in there.
When I do the update for the continuum of care, the point in time numbers are in by Rachel. Thank goodness she's all done entering the housing inventory numbers and the point in time numbers, and she's done a really nice infographic. And I think most of you guys have seen that, but if you haven't, we can send that to you. The data committee has reviewed it, suggested a couple little tweaks to the graphic. And I cannot remember for the life of me how we tend to handle this, but it does get the chart gets passed around, and at this virtual meeting it'll be posted. They take a look at it, they ask questions, and then if the press release is all ready to go, then MDHA then releases that after the meeting when after the planning council has had a chance to review that data. Has there been a vote to do that? To sort of say, okay it, or I don't remember. I know there's been quite a bit of conversation in the past, but I don't know whether a vote is required to sort of say, yeah, we approve this, run with it in a press release kind of thing.
I remember last year, it was kind of a vote because we did not approve it, and there were some amendments made to it, and it was resent to the planning council before hitting press release.
Yes, I confirm. I remember also that we've had the votes in the past to approve it and move it up. In the last 2 years, that's how we've done it.
Okay.
Action item, and it should say vote, and it should, does the actual motion have to be on there?
Okay, so an action item is to approve the PIT and HIC.
Well, it's really just the PIT numbers because the HIC isn't really presented there. So, okay. Even though, I know it's not supposed to be publicized until the press release, but the data committee has already reviewed it and seen it. Is it the kind of thing that could be distributed along with, minutes and the agenda to the planning council members so that they have a chance to look at it and sort of, review it before the actual tackle it at the meeting? Or is that letting the cat out of the bag a little bit too much?
Well, one of the things is, first of all, I would recommend that the motion includes kind of if there was a recommendation, if this is a recommendation from the data committee for the planning council to move ahead with approval of this data, that should actually help planning council members to see that, yes, our committee has, the data committee has reviewed this, they have been back and forth. So that would be good to include that in the motion. And then it's up to you as the executive committee if you can deliberate right now, if you want it sent out ahead of time, if what's the pro and con. If it's sent out ahead of time, it could be takes still published before there's a vote.
I'm going to check the data committee notes, the draft notes real quick, and just sort of see. I know they were definitely in favor of the numbers, and like the infographic had some minor changes, but I don't know what the real, if there was a motion or a true recommendation, but there was certainly a sense from that committee that it looked good and they wanted to proceed to present it to the planning council.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on mute because there's a little noise here.
I know that you all are fully aware of, the way some of those numbers can be interpreted. So I may be just preaching to the choir, but, I think last year we really wanted to hone in on giving the community a much broader picture than just the pit count, but having the pit count in, as the focus. I'm not sure if the data committee was able to do something like that with like maybe getting some of the hero program numbers and some of the numbers that, because I'll tell you, for me and, our board members, they're like, it's only 2,000 people that are homeless. Why do you need, $5 million to address the problem? So if they always see that small number, it's like we're minimizing, but asking for large dollars. So I don't know.
So April, I think that's exactly what the issue was last year. That was put out, and why we tweaked it a little bit to make it reflect what you're talking about a little better. So hopefully we'll be able to use that same kind of template that we released last year that actually makes sure that it calls attention to the fact that this is a very brief snapshot and not the full picture of homelessness in Nashville. So awesome.
And so that. Jump in on that one, because that's exactly what I've seen. I just received a draft of the press release, and it's based on last year's template. It includes an entire, you remember that pyramid that really shows the top is like the pit count is just one small aspect, and then it really goes into who's left out basically in the pit count. So Susie, awesome. Do you want to add something to that?
I'd be glad to send that to the exec committee so you guys see what it looks like. There's still some draft things that I need Judy and Abby to go over, and then the mayor's statement, of course, will be different. And then Jim Harbison will need to put something in there, but it shows you that it does go more in depth. It does mention that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of people who are in desperate straits, and then it also has it shines a light on some good things that have been going on and some work that is exciting. So, but I'll send that to you after the meeting.
And I just want to I want to praise Susie, and I do this every year because going back to 2004 when this first started, and I've been a journalist then, she has been always very clear in her communication, but it's still confusing. It's like no matter how clear we are in this communication, until we have that whole HMS number, and we're working on that, it's still, April, you're absolutely right. It's still going to be confusing, so we can only do the best we can. And I think this press release is what we as in this field need to just push to really the whole picture, that whole pyramid message of this is one piece to the puzzle, and not the whole picture. Yeah.
So do we have any more data from the HMIS system that we can throw into this press release, just saying, although this is a one-time count, our wider system shows X?
No, and the reason is we don't have the shelters in there yet. So like 96% of the shelter beds are missing. So you're not going to get a full picture. And then we have numbers. I would be like, let's work. We have the HMIS capacity grant. I put that in the press release that we're working on that. This year we received that grant to exactly come up with these numbers, and we need to show that that's what we're working towards, to give those fuller numbers. And yeah, we have reached a milestone with that grant and working actively on it. So yeah. And frankly, from a media perspective, it's the same thing with PowerPoints. You do one thing per slide. If you involve too many different data together, everybody's just going to take the calculator and add up, and they're adding oranges and apples and come up with their own numbers.
All right. Well, thank you for that. All right. So we're supposed to be talking about COVID task force continuation next. So Judy and I met with, we haven't met since we've talked, since we've done this, have we, Judy? No. Judy and I met with the mayor's chief of staff, Bill Phillips.
Phillips.
Yeah.
Phillips. Yeah, Bill
Kind of about our experiences and things that have happened of late, and our frustrations around the letter that we sent and the recommendations that we sent. It was a great meeting. He was very attuned to what's going on and the difficulties that we've been having, and he told us that he was going to be appointing a permanent liaison from the mayor's office to the Homeless Planning Council. However, that was a week and a half ago, and I have not, was it a week and a half or 2 weeks ago? It's been 2 weeks now, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So we've still not heard from him. Judy, unless you have heard from him.
He's in touch, but no, not on, I don't have it.
Not on the liaison. Okay. So I'm going to send him an email and follow up with that to see where we're at and kind of what he sees that's going to look like. So that, anyway, it was very encouraging. He understood where we were coming from and what our frustrations were, and wanted to make sure that we felt more engaged. So hopefully we'll get there. In the meantime, we did get another request for some thoughts and recommendations. However, the request for that came on a Wednesday at 3:30, and they wanted some recommendations by Friday morning. And it was not something that we could pull together because we didn't have anything to give them. And we couldn't pull together a meeting that quickly because of public meeting issues and laws. So what I'd like to see is if we're going to get calls from the mayor's office and asking for recommendations on we've been discussing that if someone calls Judy and says, Judy, as the director of the Homelessness Planning Council, can you give me information about whatever? Judy would have that and be able to say, the council has been talking about whatever. So in order to do that, I think the more specifically around everything, the COVID response in Metro, the task force needs to continue to meet to begin to flesh out for all these recommendations. And our request was that here are our recommendations, but I know I'm breaking up, Judy, I'm sorry. My internet connection is just not stable, sorry. Anyway, if we can have that committee working on fleshing out some of those recommendations, then we could just have them ready when we're asked for them, which we don't have right now. So that's one of the things I think we wanted to talk about, ask the council next week if we could continue that. Does anybody have any thoughts?
So it almost sounds like what we're describing is what I would call a case.
Did I break up again?
Case statement. So when I used to run the hospital foundation, I came up with a case statement that's like 40, 50 pages long. And not that we need one that long, but what it did was it gave me little pieces, parts where I could take page 20 and give it to someone because it answered the questions they needed about how the hospital, what were the number of uninsured patients in Nashville that we treated last year. I had all that. So I think what we're describing is a kind of a case statement, but it also gives us the capacity later to do fundraising, to actually leverage all the HUD dollars we get and so forth. So I would hope that we'd sort of think in a bigger way about how to construct something like that.
I think that's a good idea. The question specifically that we were asked and not prepared to answer was if we were opposed to people being arrested for breaking their quarantine, specifically folks who are experiencing home, what would be our alternative suggestions? And we didn't have any, and so that's what we said, is that we don't have a recommendation at this point. However, we'd love to be able to think about it and come up with some ideas about what could happen instead of arresting people. Yeah. And
Well, and when you think about it, when I think about any of our staff that tested positive, who showed up at their door to verify if they stayed inside or arrest them if they stepped 1 foot outside? So it's like criminalizing them, not only because they're homeless, but also because they have COVID. Now, I am all for, they need to sit down, right? We don't want this out there any more than it needs to be out there. But we had several staff members that tested positive, and no one showed up at their door to verify that they stayed home. And actually, the health department said if they are considered essential staff and they don't have any symptoms, they could come back to work. Of
Wow.
course, we said no, we don't want them back in this building until they are. Oh, yeah, that's what the health department told us. If they are asymptomatic and they don't have any of the symptoms, I think it was 3 days out from the positive test without symptoms, they could come back to work.
That's incredible.
The Salvation Army agreed not to allow them to come back to work and paid them for their time off. They didn't have to use sick time or any of that. We just assumed they got it while at work. We don't know, but we just assume that. And so, maybe even the alternative would be just more literature and more training for the police department from the health department on, different situations like that. If they can verify that an essential staff member can come back to work 3 days out from a positive test with no symptoms, then, maybe that should be somebody that we align our conversation with.
yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that we need to talk about and flesh out when it comes to this. And I think so there, to bring back recommendations to the full council. So that, again, Mark, I like what you said about having I forget what you just called it, but something that we can draw on to say, here are our thoughts, our processes, our policies, our recommendations, and we have them. Here they are. Whenever you need them, it will be kind of a continual revamping of them as needed. But specifically around COVID at this point and our response to that, I think it's important for us to have those continuing conversations around fleshing out those recommendations that we did make. One of the things about quarantine for folks who are experiencing homelessness is the availability of mental health services. And part of the problem that I think that we had initially, particularly with the gentleman that was arrested early on, it's just a lack of communication, a lack of understanding. And part of that, I think, just speaks to the need for the right people to be able to give the information and help our folks understand what it all means so that they can make the right choices for themselves when it comes to what they need to do. So anyway, all right. So that will be something that we'll talk about at the meeting next week, and that ad hoc group for a little while longer. So.
I want to just encourage you all to continue doing that on a number of levels. But when you think about COVID, there are a number of different things that you have to kind of take into account. The ESG funds that have come to MDHA are like $10 million. And transparency and a targeted approach and a thoughtful, community oriented process that sort of divvies that money up is really important. And I think the Planning Council can play a role there. And then in terms of some of those funds can be used to house the people if and when, it's not just if, when the congregate shelter has to empty out. And it seems to me that there could be some pressure to bear on MDHA to put a priority on homelessness as identified, and vulnerable homeless folks to get into the housing projects for some of these folks. Anyway, that's I'm really glad to hear that you don't want it to stop in its tracks, and I think there's a lot of work to be done for that ad hoc committee.
I got one
Okay.
technical.
Thank you, Susie.
Do we need an action item to continue it, or did we,
Actually, we do.
so we're
It-
just gonna do that?
Yeah, we do, because the stated purpose that we had initially was to create the recommendations that we created. We completed that task. Therefore, to continue, we would need to approve the continuation of that ad hoc committee for a little bit longer to continue to address and to continue to work toward fully creating recommendations with, I don't know.
And then the other thing I do recommend, actually, and it goes to what Susie was saying. So we on our actually the agenda for next week, we have the hard technical assistance summary, and that's kind of what Susie was speaking about. And we're going to get to that on our agenda, I think, at one point. I will put that before the task force continuation, because one of the purposes could be, and April is, you guys selected April as the representative of that team that works with HUD technical assistance provider on that $10 million ESG and other funding, kind of the systems improvement conversation. And it would make sense for that conversation for April to report back to that task force
Yes.
what
Yes.
the conversation is, and before it goes to the planning council, and it helps to always get some smaller input before it goes to the big council.
Thanks, Judy.
Right. And thank you, April, for doing that.
Not a problem. I'm happy to serve, and I think that having the planning council help in making a recommendation has much more transparency for our community. We've been in situations where it was not a transparent process, and we became like a divided community at a point. So don't want to see that happen, especially when we got bigger fish to fry.
And on that note, the other good news is, so we have April on there, and we also have a consumer advisory board member, Sheila Decker, on there now. So that we have a person with lived experience who has direct input at that kind of with the HUD technical assistance provider in Metro as well.
Okay. Sounds great. All right. Are we ready for our strategic plan process progress discussion?
Rock and roll.
Okay, so I sent out an email with updates that I put together. I asked all the committees to give updates in early June. Yes, exactly. And I pulled only the action thingy, and basically it tells you where everything is. The question I have, especially for you all today, so a lot of the items that are assigned to the executive committee are the ones that are actually untouched, and I didn't know how to update. And a lot of it has to do with how we communicate, how we actually report out progress on the strategic plan, and how one of the items I think is also a discussion amongst you, how you update and recommend for the Homelessness Planning Council to move forward with updating the plan. And now with more dollars coming in, I think it's actually really important that that you review where all of that is and what you're comfortable with in doing. So how do you want to best proceed along that note? I mean, it would be easier to do it in person, but since you're now moving forward virtually, I just want to throw out there some, where there needs to be a more focused approach, I think, from the executive committee to also then ask for the committee inputs based on the strategic plan and how this is utilized.
So I'm going to sort of punt back to you, Judy. I'm thinking to the extent you can go through this and just redline it and say, you know, hey, you guys need to step up and make more recommendations or additional action steps, or hey, we completed X. That's going to help me, since I only have about 15 minutes left on this call. I have a meeting at 3 that I can't miss. So
Yeah, actually, I agree, Mark. That would be very helpful.
Okay, I'll put a summary together just for the executive committee to really make here's where it is, and then I can also very clearly, if that helps you with the understanding that this is a draft and you can always change it, make some recommendations on how to proceed.
Also, Judy, if I remember correctly, I think that a lot of our action steps, and I don't have it in front of me, so don't quote me on this, but I think that a lot of our action step was based on work that was being done in the committee, like presenting a report on what's being done so far, and, you know,
Yes.
not to blame everything on COVID and or tornado, but I don't know if there's a lot of work that's been done in the committees that have actually come up to us to like compile a report on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We have that now. Once you see the email, we have that now, but it really was at the point where we got to that point and then COVID hit. That's how I feel. I mean, so yes, I'm using it too. That really, I feel you all were ready to move forward and actually look at it. And then it was March, you know, so.
I mean, I think, you know, April, that's a good point, but, you know, tornado, COVID, I mean, it is what it is. So.
And frankly, also with the new reality,
you know, make sure you're.
Sorry? Oh, I was moving. Yeah, I was moving. Sorry, never mind. One of the things also with COVID, this is now a new reality. So whatever the meeting would have been, it may have looked like different regardless, you know, so.
Right.
And
so
in a
so
way,
yeah,
it's meant to be.
helping us, you know, put a pinpoint in exactly, you know, where we need to get off our behinds and get done, you know, would be helpful.
Okay.
All right. All right, then, committee appointments, where are we at with, what do we need to do there?
Sorry. I have put together a whole separate lists for Paula to actually sign based on, you know, a form for every committee that lists the committee members and appoints them officially. And based on the charter right now, it would just need the chair's signature. So I wanted to just get your input on if you just move forward. So we're basing it on just how it was done last year, but do it really a committee signature per committee and not just one sheet for everybody. So I just wanted to be transparent, mention how we're gonna move forward with that, and send that over to Paula for signature and approval. And then Paula, if you want to discuss it further within the executive committee, or once you see that, and you should have actually gotten that email,
Okay.
then or with the planning council, then that's up to you how you want to proceed on that one. And then the only committee that's not developed, that hasn't been appointed, so there are two things with the committees that need to be filled. One, the executive committee, we're still 3 members, we wanted 5, so it's, I don't know, that's one of the committees that needs to have 2 more appointments. And then the resource development committee has not been formed. However, having said that, we are now working with the HUD technical assistance on the COVID dollars, and I would love to see what's coming out based on the last recommendation. So they're looking at, or we are in there, have a community discussion about creating a housing central command type of structure. It would make sense to look at who needs to be on a Resource Development Committee to kind of overlap what's happening around the COVID funds, so that, because basically what's going to happen is Resource Development Committee should then focus what happens after these COVID funds. They're one-time funding. It's one-time $10 million. Yes, it may be over a 2-year spending, which then would, we don't have all the details yet, but it could be basically to continue whatever we build. The community will have to come up with $5 million. So that could actually be the task of such a committee. But so it would make sense to overlap whoever is working and what that structure looks like. And I would recommend to wait for at least 1 month to appoint the actual committee members and align it with what's happening in ESG.
That's fine. And as for the executive committee, I want to go back to that for just a second. You know, one of the things that happened with the executive committee was that we were told that we put in the charter to have chairs of other committees, 2 chairs be brought on to the executive committee. The problem is that then to be on the executive committee of the planning council, you had to be actually a planning council member. We didn't really have any committees that were chaired by planning council members, so we couldn't put those people on, particularly someone who with lived experience. So we ran into that problem, which is why it never happened. We, as part of the charter revision process, we're going to fix that and have a little bit more flexibility about who else to appoint to the executive committee. The issue is that those people still need to be members of the planning council. Can't have an executive committee of the planning council that's made up of members who are people who are not on the planning council. That makes sense, but we're going to take out I think we'll take out the part where it says committee chairs, because then we can open it up. You don't have to be a committee chair. You just have to be on the planning council to be part of the executive committee, which makes more sense. So we'll make that recommendation to the revisions to the charter, and then hopefully be able to get a couple of folks, particularly someone with lived experience, onto this executive committee. So, all right. Well, that all sounds good. What else do we have? Right.
In terms of the committees, Paula, and I'll add this to, I've got several pages of sort of suggested edits. The folks who are nominees and are very interested in serving on the planning council, I think we need to capitalize on that group, because of course not all of them will be voted in, and these committees will sort of become committees, and then who knows when we're going to submit ballots. But after the meeting where the election is held from the COC general, it would be really nice to place the folks who were excited about serving on the planning council but not elected on a committee where, you know, they fit best and they get nurtured, and then next year maybe they can do something different, or they can just sit on a committee and like that working sort of environment. So I'm going to suggest in the charter that there be a bit more flexibility on when committee folks can enter during the year, because if they got to wait for a year, we're going to lose them. Just an idea.
That doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to my next question about, so if we're not, the nominating committee is not ready to elect folks just yet. So we're going to have some gap. We're going to vote to keep those people on until election, right? What's happening? You know?
I don't know.
You were asking about what's happening with the mayor's appointees. So basically, I had the mayor's office had reached out to me earlier this month, and they asked me, so as soon as we have a nomination roster, they would be interested just to seeing what that is. And then I don't think they're ready to appoint anybody until July. That's what it sounded like.
Okay.
Well, at this point, that's what it's going to be.
But at the same time, sorry, I was breaking up.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so will those people who
Oh, you're breaking up, but I think you want,
Damn it.
yes,
No.
yes.
All right, one more time. People are going to roll off. Mayor appointees. Those positions will remain vacant until the mayor reappoints.
Yes, correct.
Correct.
Okay. What about the executive committee?
At the planning council meeting last month, you all voted to extend the executive committee. And
Okay.
if the membership extends April's seat, then you'll have all the members of the executive committee still in place.
Okay, all right. I wanted to make sure. I thought we did, but I couldn't remember
Yeah.
for sure. So we're extended for a month until we get that election done and potentially the mayor appointing folks. And so are we talking about electing a new executive committee as of the 1st of August?
I have to go back and look at the language of the votes that you guys did in June.
There was literature about extending the executive committee beyond a year.
Say that again, April.
Thought at the meeting that we had virtually, I'm not sure. Everything is a blur for me, but I just remember there being language around getting a vote to extend the executive committee beyond 1 year, just to have continuity and keep, progressing forward. Do you remember any of?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know how long we extended it was my question, I think.
Yeah.
We voted to extend beyond our June 30th rollover date, but I don't know if we put a time limit on it, did we?
I
I
don't know.
don't know. Hold on, I'm trying to look it up.
Okay,
I'm gonna have to sign up, y'all.
that's okay. And Abigail, you can email us all with that information when you find it, so just we know.
I will.
Mark,
Yep.
thank you very much. I think we're pretty much done. Did you have anything else you wanted us to talk about before you leave?
Nope. Rock on.
All right, we'll see you later then. Thanks. Okay, so need to discuss today? Nope.
Not anything that I can think of.
Okay. Well, April, I wanted to say to you before we sign off that I'm very sorry for the loss of your father. Hope you're doing okay. Let us know if there's anything that we can do for you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I know where you're at. My dad's been gone now for a while, so it's not easy. But if you need anything from us, please reach out.
All righty. Thanks, Paula.
Sure, of course.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we were kind of hoping that April might be able to facilitate the COC general called meeting tomorrow, but I'm not sure if you've got the energy, or the time to do that, April.
Can I do it without being on camera?
Yeah.
Okay. If you'll just send me the agenda, Abigail, I will.
I've been going over the details, and I'm going to sort of think a little bit more about them later on this afternoon and give you sort of a cheat sheet. I'll work on roll call. She'll work on sort of building the foundation in terms of the actual vote, and then planting the seeds for what to do if the things don't lift for a while. So we'll get details to you in terms of how that's going to work. We just need to keep things on track and not let them go off the rails to train Allison brothers.
Good luck with that.
I was gonna say, I don't have a lot of patience for extra stuff right now, so we're gonna.
I think it's perfectly okay for you to say that too, April. This is a large number of people with a specific agenda. We are going to stick to the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Like
I
I tell my
kids for any extra.
Like
Yeah,
I tell my kids sometimes, I say,
whoever's got the hosting control can just mute them. So
Well, that'll
All
be
right.
great. That'll be great.
That's very generous of you, April. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you all.
All right.
I move to adjourn.
So done. All right. I'll see you guys later. All right.
All righty.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.